Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is day 75. Woo. 3 sets of 25. 3/4 away to 100.
You just turned 75, right?
Yeah. Almost.
March. It feels like it some days, don't it?
Yes, it does.
March the 16th. We're going to look at Deuteronomy 14, verses 22 through 29. It took us 75 days to get to this topic. So if anybody ever tells you that all the church wants is your money, we talked about 75 other things before we talked about this. So today we're going to talk about the tithe. So I don't know, I guess since it's 8 verses, I can read the whole thing and we can talk about it. It says, you must set aside a tithe of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, and eat it there in his presence. This applies to your tithes of grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn males of your flocks and herds. Doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. Now when the Lord your God blesses you with a good harvest, the place of worship he chooses for his name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds, put the money in a pouch, and go to the place the Lord your God has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want: cattle, sheep, goats, wine, and other alcoholic drink.
I would think this would motivate a lot of people to start tithing.
Yeah, I know, right? Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God, and celebrate with your household, and do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. At the end of every 3rd year, bring the entire tithe of the year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you, the orphans of the land, the orphans, the widows in your town, so they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all your work. So he defines tithe, first of all, as a tenth. That's what the word tithe means. It means a tenth. And we can argue about whether you should tithe or not, but we can't argue about what the definition of the word tithe is. Have you ever had anybody debate with you whether something was a tithe?
Yeah, they'd say, well, I tithe 5%. No, you give 5%, but you don't tithe, because by very definition it has to be 10%.
Right.
Yep.
You had any debates about that, Zach? Or are you too young?
Too young.
Okay.
Don't know what money is.
So one of the things in this passage specifically, now this isn't the case in every passage where it talks about tithing, but in this passage, what they brought, they got to enjoy. Mm-hmm. They got to participate in. They got to, it even mentions alcoholic drink. Mm-hmm. Does that play out today? Do you believe people still participate in the benefits from their tithing? If so, how?
I would say absolutely yes. For instance, if you attend a local church and you tithe there, you enjoy the facility, you enjoy the programming, and all the benefits that go along with being a part of that local fellowship comes back to you in many, many different ways. And we participate in that, and we enjoy that, and so in some ways we do, quote, feast and get a return on what we have given, what we've provided.
Yeah, instead of alcoholic drinks, the youth get Mountain Dew, and cheerwine. So, not a bad trade, I've got to say. Cheerwine's pretty good. But absolutely, I mean, that's the thing is, the church is blessed, and obviously the church is blessed through the tithing of the people, but that all does go back. I mean, it either goes to help missionaries, or it goes back to the programs, which help us all grow in our faith. So, it goes around, and I think I think if you're in a good church, they're using that tithe money to bless many people more than even just the one person that gave. It's when we all come together that it spreads out and does some pretty amazing things. Right.
So what we're doing right here is a use of that tithe money that we're giving back to the people as a benefit. Obviously people are participating. Right. They're consuming this content. Even people outside the church, I'm convinced more people outside of our body are participating than are inside at this point. And I think that's an extremely positive thing. It might be a youth program. If you have teenagers, your teenagers get something back. It could be the fact that you can come and worship with a low pressure environment. You know, you don't have to set it up, turn the lights on, you know, vacuum the floor.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are done. You get to walk in, somebody's prepared the music, there's a sound system so that, you know, it's clear. I mean, there are multiple ways where we still participate in. We don't come in and eat the food, even though sometimes that happens. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it does include being able to eat food. So I think that's important for us to understand. It says, though, that as you tithe, it will teach you to fear God. How does tithing teach us to fear God?
I think it causes us to remember that everything we have is a gift from God, that we're dependent on Him. There's a passage that tells us the ability to even get wealth, and that's on any level, whether it's $1 or $100,000, is given to us by God. And tithing and giving should be a constant reminder that we are dependent on Him, and it's our way of saying thanks and that we trust You for the future. To be able to give up and give away is acknowledgement that you've been faithful in the past, and I'm trusting You for the future provision as well.
It's kind of like a financial trust fall, if you will. You know, it's like I trust God, but there's still fear in, like, when you do a trust fall, there's still a little bit of fear, like, are they going to catch me? We know God is always going to catch us, and He's always going to provide for us and take care of us. But there is still that, you know, that fear of like, and hopefully you're not too fearful in tithing, but I think, you know, when you're giving, you are giving up something, you are sacrificing something. But like you were just saying, Jay, although we think of it as it might be thinking, oh man, this is a big sacrifice of our own. Ultimately, it's really God's in the first place. It belongs to God. And so it was giving it back to Him and trusting that He is going to provide for us even through this, and use our tithes to provide for many other people.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, I think the whole awe, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about fear. We're not talking about, I'm scared of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's the magnificence of God that I think when we recognize that it's not ours to begin with, and we're returning it back to Him, it changes our perspective, even on what we have, you know, on what's left over. And I've heard people say many times that we're much better off with the 90% left over than the 100% if we kept it all. Yeah. And I think that's a challenge. So it goes on toward the end there, and it says, you know, they're obviously taking care of the Levites who don't have a land they're supposed to eat, but it says you're supposed to do this. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all your work. How does tithing return back to us? How does God bless us because of tithing?
In many, many ways, you know, I find it interesting in this passage, he talks about the family household doing that as a unit and celebrating together. I think giving, tithing, not just tithing, but that's what we're focused on here, should be a household event. You know, I should be teaching my children and my grandchildren the significance of in faith required in trusting God to give and to share, and that He's going to make provision, and it should be a type of celebration. And I think we have missed that. You and I have had conversations in the past that's one of the areas I feel like I didn't do a real good job on. You know, that I've always given and always tithed and given beyond tithing, but not necessarily made it a family event, to whereas they knew that this was a significant part of worship. You know, it's not just the singing, it's not just going to the church, but it is giving back to God and trusting Him. And you asked the question, how does it impact you in every area of life? It impacts.
Not always financially. It's not
That's
always
right.
give 1,000, get 10,000 back.
It's not? Oh my goodness.
He said, "You've been waiting all this time, all right?"
Your check's in the mail.
You know, but sometimes our relationships, our marriages, and I mentioned children, wisdom to parent, and all those things come, I'm convinced, oftentimes they're facilitated by our obedience in our giving. And He then makes other provisions that we need, whether it's wisdom and insight, to come into play so that all the areas of our lives can be enriched.
Yeah, even from when I was a kid, like you were saying, instilling it in the family early is a good thing. When we were kids, we didn't make a lot of money. You know, we made like a quarter if we vacuumed and things like that, but we would still tithe on that. And when we were growing up, and I just remember doing that, and tithing, I think, as a family too, it's a powerful example of what Christ did for us in a very small way. I mean, it's powerful for a kid, but even as an adult to remember that while this seems like a big, it might to some of us seems like a big sacrifice, to some of us it may not seem like much, but ultimately when we are making that sacrifice, it is a constant reminder, even when I was a kid, of what Christ had done for us. But he didn't just give 10% of himself, he gave everything.
Yeah, and as a kid, when we did chores, we usually, I remember we got an allowance $3 a week, but it was $2 bills and 10 dimes, so we could tithe three dimes. It was something I learned early. But I've told people before, I'm firmly convinced that my generosity and my willingness to tithe has mitigated some of the bad circumstances. It kept the full-blown consequences of certain circumstances coming down on me, because God wanted to continue to use me as a giver, and he was going to try to
salvage that so that you could continue.
That's right.
I believe that.
I see that in my own life, and so some of the blessings are just, I didn't suffer as much damage as I could have, because of my faithfulness. That's how I would see it. All right. Well, let's close up in prayer today. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your grace. Thank you for the provision that you give to us. Thank you for a heart that is moved to give back. Thank you for the things that, as we do tithe to a local church, the benefits, the blessings of things such as this podcast, that we're able to receive back as a blessing, as a part of that, to enjoy together, to participate together. May we be diligent about and be faithful about being generous people who seek to honor you and to know more about you, to fear you, to see your magnificence in better ways, because we're willing to sacrifice financially for the work that you have called us to do. In Jesus' name.